Hey friends! Welcome to Spirit Club, a podcast and community that is all about doing the inner work to live an aligned and, dare I say, happy life. I'm your host, spiritual guide and intuitive, Angell Kelly, and I'm here to share my teachings along with messages passed on to me from higher consciousness. I've also got incredible guests in store to help you go down all those spiritual rabbit holes. So let's go! Welcome to the club! Hello, Spirit Club. I'm here with another guest episode, and I have a feeling that this audience is really going to want to hear from today's guest. You've all asked for more woo, and so I listened. Today we have Sheryl Wagner, a psychic medium, a teacher, and the author of Uncovering Intuition. And Sheryl was actually my mediumship teacher for about 7 months, I want to say, back in 2023. So I learned a lot from her, and it feels always like one of those deep full circle moments when you get to have that person on your podcast. So welcome, Sheryl. Thank you for coming.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, yay. It's fun to connect with you again. It's been years, but or years-ish. But social media always makes you feel like, oh yeah, we've been talking, but
It
really it's
does.
just,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a gift. It's the gift, one of the gifts of social media. Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Um,
It is. It does feel like we've been connected in some way.
yeah. And here we are, live and in person. So let's get deeper. I always like to find out sun, moon, and rising of the guests so that I can just
Yeah.
understand them through another lens. So if you wouldn't mind sharing with the audience your sun, moon, and rising.
Oh, yeah. So I'm an Aquarius sun, I'm a Gemini rising, and a Leo moon. So lots of air and fire.
Hey, Leo moon. Ooh, Leo moon. Or sorry, Leo rising. Leo rising. Okay.
No,
Yes.
Gemini
Leo rising.
rising, Leo and Leo moon. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Aquarius sun. I'm very familiar with those. I feel like I have my soon to be husband's an Aquarius sun. Tell me a
Oh,
little about
interesting.
tell me about Leo moon. What's it like having a Leo moon?
I think so. So Leo moon with Aquarius sun it's like they're in opposition. So I'm a full moon baby. I was born on the full moon. And it's
Right.
like I think it's like your inner self like wants to be seen. But then like
Yeah.
the outer self is more like aloof and only wants to communicate in certain ways. So for me, I definitely
Mm.
feel that sort of the opposite of it.
And you feel like sort of like a push pull a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. And going through, really creative periods and like wanting to share things with people and then wanting to like retreat and sort of hide away.
Yeah.
And that's kind of been a lifelong journey.
Yeah, but you know what I mean? You can have whatever reality you want. And I feel like you have created that for yourself.
Yeah, I'm much more comfortable. I would say in the last decade, it's been much more comfortable than it was like earlier in life.
I'm
So
sure. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Ah, interesting. Okay. Okay. And then my one icebreaker question. So this podcast is all about doing the inner work, spiritually, personal development in order to live a happy and aligned life. So
Yeah.
I'm curious, we're going to start deep. And my question for you is, what spiritual work theme lesson are you currently working with right now?
Oh, that's interesting. What am I working with right now? I definitely, this is a very basic lesson that I feel like I've been working with forever, but I'm really calling in like more self-trust.
Mm.
And I feel like that's something that I continually go back to, more self-trust, and also, letting go of old narratives that creep in. The more we do, the more we create, it never ends. And so just kind of continually wanting to be, clear and myself and, not making those choices based on old stories that we've told ourselves.
Yeah. Self-trust is I mean, for the work that you do, what a huge one, right? Like, I
Yeah.
mean, you can't be working in the intuitive space and not have self-trust.
Yeah.
So have you found that it's really been like layers? just like new level, new devil kind of thing.
It really is, yeah, because as you work through things, and you kind of reach certain maybe milestones, I think it's really natural. For me, I sort of raise the bar. I expect more of myself. I expect more of the work. I share more. And so, and then you connect with more of the public, and your work isn't always received in the way you expect it to be. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, it is really like working through levels of it. And, that's the work. Like,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And it really makes sense to me when I think like, especially like growing a business, it's like you will reach more people.
Yeah.
The more people you reach, the more self-trust you need because the more pushback you get, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that definitely some of that. And also, I think the more we can share about like who we truly are, and um, you can also really connect with really specific people. And so I think it's been both. Like, so you get sort of some static, and it kind of, I'm a really sensitive person, but it definitely, that type of stuff tends to bother me like less and less, like maybe people that don't believe in what I do, or, you know, have a problem with it. And I think there's also like I get to meet really amazing people, and that's also like people that hear, or read my book or hear me share something and are like, wow, I felt like you were just speaking to me directly. And so we get to, the more we share, I think we get to like get really meet our people,
Right.
which is such a
Right. You
nice
get
part of
both.
the spiritual
Right.
journey.
Yes. Right. Beautiful. Well, thank you for sharing that. I know it's like a, hey, be vulnerable the minute you got on here.
Oh, that's
But
okay. I'm ready.
I knew you'd be down for it. Okay, so Cheryl, I've known you for a couple of years. I've worked with you, but somehow I don't know, like, how this all began for you. You're a psychic medium. Were you born connecting to those who have passed? Was this a skill you developed later on in life? I would love to hear, like, kind of how it all began.
Yeah, I think it's both. And I really, I first of all want to say I don't believe that just some of us can connect to the spirit world. I really believe that everyone can connect to spirit. And, certainly I'm in a space where I get to meet folks that are curious about the spirit world. And so if I think about a group of people who's curious about the spirit world, who's interested, who's open and loving, all of those people that I've met can connect to spirit. And it doesn't necessarily mean they would all enjoy, the work that I do or working with the
Right.
public, but we can all make that connection. And so just like any other, sort of ability, telling someone like only certain people are mediums is sort of like saying, oh, only certain people could learn to play an instrument or something. It just,
Right.
so it's not really, yeah, it doesn't make us special in that way. But
Hmm.
yeah, I have had a sort of, I think it's been more of a series of awakenings, like a lot of folks. I had connection to spirit when I was young and didn't really understand it. And then there was like major life events that really opened things up and intensified that connection. And then I would sort of, suppress it, and then it would come back again. And so, I think of, loss of my childhood friend when I was in my early 20s. Also having a near death experience after medical trauma. Those things really opened me up. And then, finally, the last one where I came into this work was after my son was experiencing a health crisis. I had this, really, really burnout and sort of, breakdown after this burnout. I had been working, really long hours, and just finally, I was like, I couldn't hold it back anymore. And that was about 8 years ago. And then coming into this work and finally really understanding and developing it.
Okay. So, those moments where you may have like experienced it a little bit and then suppressed it, um, were you aware of what you were experiencing? Because today there's so much, I'm so lucky. I'm so lucky that there's so many teachers, there's so much on
Yeah.
social media, there's so much on YouTube. 8 years ago, 8+ years ago, there wasn't. So, were you aware of what you were experiencing?
No, I really wasn't. I mean, it was natural for me to have sort of connections to spirit. I didn't have the language for it, although I would talk to people that were close to me and, heard stories about, I have a great grandmother who used to read like tea leaves and, just things you would see on TV in the 90s. I never thought about the word mediumship. I never thought about that, I would say prior to the last 8 years or so. I just knew that I knew things. I had dreams about things that were going to happen. I was connecting with my own loved ones that had passed and things like that. I think I really started to get the language around it when I decided I was having this, burnout, having this breakdown, and I decided to share it with my therapist. And, really luckily for me, I was like saying, I'm hearing, I'm talking to people and hearing things and seeing things. And she suggested, not that I needed psychiatric help. She suggested that I go to a medium. And she's like, it sounds like you're a medium. And that was really the first time I had heard that, suggestion. And I did go to a medium. And when I met with him, he said that I was a medium, that I was gonna, write a book about my life, which I did in 2020, and that I was going to teach mediumship, which I started doing, years ago. And interestingly enough, I didn't know this at the time. We became friends, and it was a few months after that I found out that he actually was the son of my doctor when I had the near-death experience. He was the son of my doctor, and so we had this really, interesting connection, and we're still friends now. And I'm really lucky to have, I was able to have some mentors, that person, and then other mentors, and yeah. And so I feel you. Like, I feel like a lot of things that I create, writing a book and creating courses and putting really tons of like articles and content for people. Whenever someone emails me a question, I end up like writing a blog. And just cause it's like, it's not out there, and it really wasn't, I feel like there really wasn't a lot of information, or there wasn't a lot of relatable information that I connected to when I was kind
Mhm.
of trying to figure things out. It was more people that I met, and spirit brought me into, what I think is the right place and the right time.
Yeah. And spirit really does, like I would, the same sort of thing happened to me as I start to experience things. I really didn't know what I was experiencing. And then, mentors and teachers sort of came forward. Um,
Yeah.
and without that, I don't, I don't know that I would have gone anywhere with that. So thank God for mentors and mentors like yourself. Um, okay, quick, like almost like lingo question, because I
Yeah.
feel there's a lot of, and there's probably no right or wrong answer to this, but medium, to me, mediumship was always connecting with those who have passed. Um, what is, psychic, medium, intuition, intuitive reader? How do you differentiate between all this terminology?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I feel like there's so many different interpretations and people using words. And like you said, I don't feel like there's any wrong or right answer. But my feeling is I use psychic and intuitive sort of interchangeably. It almost
Mhm.
means the same thing to me. And I know people have sort of reactions to different language, but to me, psychic, intuitive, we're connecting to the energy around us. We're connecting to the earth plane. So connecting to another person's energy, the energy of a place. And it's sort of an inner knowing, a sense that we get. And everyone, absolutely everyone has intuition. I know your listeners know that. It's very natural for us. And so, really one simple thing they could do is just notice how we feel before we start to think. And it's like we
Mhm.
start to notice that throughout the day. And it's just intuition is the most natural thing. Um, Mediumship is for me, I'm an evidential medium. So my clients are coming to me for mediumship readings. They want to connect to their loved ones who are in spirit. And so for me, it's connecting with that living intelligence. It's connecting with a spirit person, and then bringing that information, to their loved one that's here, and really letting them know, they see their life, they're a witness to their journey. And, there's lots of different ways people can connect to the other world. They connect to spirit guides, they can connect to, their own loved ones, pets, and things like that. And that could all sort of go under the umbrella of mediumship. For evidential mediumship, it's important. For me, I always want to be like clear in intentions when someone's coming to me for a session. If they're coming for a mediumship reading, I'm, setting the intention to open up my awareness and then, have this family reunion or connect them to, friends, lovers, family, and the other world, animal companions. And so that's what mediumship really means to me.
I see. Okay, yeah. So connecting, essentially, to
Yeah, to
whether
that
it
living
be
intelligence.
right. Yeah. Okay. And you know, it's so interesting. And you've worked with so many students, so I'm so curious your lens on it. Everyone has a different gift, different way they connect, different energy that they more easily or naturally connect to. Like I can connect to those who have passed, and I trained with you, and that's when I did most of that. And if I
Yeah.
set the intention for that, it's more likely to come forward. However, if I don't set the intention specifically for that, it is not likely to come forward past loved
Yeah.
ones. And more likely I'm going to be connecting to spirit guide, angel, their higher self, whatever that happens to be. So, in your experience working with students, you probably get more of the students who naturally connect to those who have passed. Is that fair to say?
I would say so. Yeah, I would say most people that have the desire and curiosity to connect to spirit, it feels really natural to them. I think the part that's natural is the connecting. The part that's maybe not natural is then sharing it with another person and waiting for feedback and validation. That's the
Mm,
sort of uncomfortable part, right? Like now, before, that moment
yeah.
sort of before we've shared anything and we're still connecting, we're
Mhm.
like mid flight, our words haven't landed yet, they haven't been judged. That's the moment where we're like free and like in that joy of doing it. I think that it's probably very uncomfortable for lots of people to, share what they're receiving, especially when it's maybe they're doing it for the first time. And so that's where that like really creating like a gentle space to explore that, I think, comes in.
Yes. Oh, the exploration is everything. It's like
Yeah, yeah.
you're not really like there's only so much you can teach, but it's really about the intention and the exploration.
That's so true. I mean, we really can't teach that connection, like that mediumship. People come with that. That's innate. We can share what's worked for us. We can share
Hmm.
techniques. We can share, like,
Hmm.
your breath is sort of like the fuel that's going to move energy in your body and like open up that connection. We can
Hmm.
say, like, you've got to pay attention to the spirit person. You've got to give them your awareness. You've got to sort of imagine, sharing space with them, sharing the mind with them, receiving impressions. And we can share, sort of techniques for then connecting with the public or connecting to practice. And there's so many things we can share around that. But that true connection, that's really innate within every person.
Yeah, definitely. Yes. And I feel like, and we kind of briefly talked about this in by email, but I feel like, and you must see it all the time, this is becoming the new language that we speak, like intuition. Whereas before, perhaps it was like a gift only a few people have, um, labeled as witchy, all these sorts of things. It's like more and more becoming a language that we all have that we're just reclaiming, uncovering, whatever that happens to be. Why do you think intuition is becoming mainstream?
I really feel like it's just our world is changing, and, that sort of these systems of power can only stay in power for so long. And so if you think about, in the past, like, people would feel very threatened by this inner power, right? And so some religious organizations, governments, like it was illegal to practice witchcraft. It still is in lots of places. And so I think that, whoever feels threatened, whoever is sort of benefiting from people not being connected to their personal power, that has, I think that pressure is sort of, it's like building and building, and people are like saying like I'm not doing it anymore, and like you were such a good example of that because I know, like, and I'm sure your listeners know, like I saw your post, like you sold your stuff and you got engaged and you moved to an island in Greece. So it's just kind of saying like, I'm in charge of my life. Like I am the authority in my life. Like
Mhm.
I give myself the authority to live my life in the way that I need to live it. And I think that's the soul. So like intuition is the soul. And I think if we're going to, as a society, keep going the way we're going, I mean, I think, not to be doom and gloom, but I think a lot of people see this. If we were just to keep going the way we're going, it's going toward not a good place.
Mhm.
But people need that. They need the soul to kind of rise up and lead them. And I see more and more people, having these spiritual awakenings. It doesn't have to be one incident. It's sort of like these mini awakenings for lots of folks, especially over the pandemic. That's when I started working online and connecting with people from like all over the world. And I've seen that, sort of people waking up. And I think a lot of times we wake up from really difficult circumstances, a
Mm.
loss, maybe a loss of a loved one, but maybe an illness, maybe a loss
Mhm.
of a job or loss of connection. Loneliness can have, cause an awakening. And so I think that, as a society, the spirit world is absolutely trying to help us, but these people are waking up to the idea that, wait a minute, there is nothing stopping me from just living my life, from
Right.
following my heart or following, what my
Mhm.
soul knows that I'm here to do.
Yes. And while it may seem like things are getting worse, it's kind of like whether they are getting worse or whether it's being portrayed that they're getting worse, it's kind of like what happens when whoever's benefiting from us suppressing our personal power gets afraid. They're gonna like
Yeah.
when they get afraid that everyone's sort of coming online, their intuition's coming online, they're trusting themselves. When they get afraid, they're going to do some scare tactics, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Energetically.
Absolutely. There's always sort of this reaction, right? And
Mhm.
and yeah, and I don't mean to say things are getting worse. I think that, especially for folks that spend a lot of time online or, wrapped up in a news cycle, it can really seem like the world is always ending. And I think that as a species, it's like we're sort of designed to think that we're the center of everything. It's all ending right now in our time. And, there's, if we look to our ancestors, like they've lived through horrible conditions, truly, like this is an amazing time to be alive. Like you can practice mediumship, you can write a book about it, you can just live your life. And we live in like the comfort, of like king and queens of like prior centuries. So
Totally.
that's something that my wife said to me a couple months ago. I was like, that's so true. Like talk about
Right.
bringing, the gratitude in. It's like we really have, not obviously not every person, like there is an immense amount of suffering in the world, but for lots of people, especially where I am in the US, it's like modern convenience of like plumbing and electricity. Like,
Hmm.
I mean, it's pretty
Right.
amazing.
Right. I know. I think about some of the food I eat. When you said that, I was like, oh, yeah, I definitely eat like a queen for sure.
Yeah. It's true. It's true. We do. We have such variety. Like we can, a lot of people, we have access to things we never had before. And it is amazing. And there's always two sides to that. There's people in food deserts.
Hmm.
But I think we have to look at, you know, if we have an intuitive people that connect to spirit, mediums, intuitive people, psychics, sensitive folks, we have this high empathy, and it can be so easy to, kind of be up all night and thinking about, just all the pain in the world. But I think we have a responsibility to also look at the beauty that's around us and what we
Yeah.
do have, control over, and our own, our own energy, what we bring. Like when we go walk around our neighborhood, are we looking at people? Are we saying hi? Are we helping, animals that need us, or, whatever that is? Like we have more power than we believe. So
Mm.
yeah, I don't feel like the world's ending, but it does feel like that, I think, for us as a species.
Yeah. Sometimes it may look that way. Yeah. Well, thank you. I
Yeah.
mean, that's a good reminder to, I mean, to not only focus on what's not working and what seems to be circling the drain.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so folks who are listening who are like, yes, I know I'm intuitive, but like, what do I do? What are some, let's see. You know, I, I can hear that one of the first challenges for folks who know they're intuitive but don't know what to do with it is their struggle to trust themselves or believe in themselves. And given that you earlier shared that that's something that you're always working on through layers, do you have any words of wisdom to work on self-trust or believing in yourself?
Yeah, I would say, intuition is very much like a relationship, if we think of it that way. If we are getting these, intuitive impressions, or we set an intention, today's the day, I'm going to notice what I feel. Or actually, I want to actually say, I'm going to pay attention to what I notice. I'm going to pay
Mm,
attention to what I notice. Intuition is all about noticing, paying attention to what we feel before our thoughts come in. We have to, I think, give it a little bit of energy. So just like any relationship, are you ghosting your intuition? Like, is your intuition giving you this really loving message? Or, you ask for a sign, and then like me, I was like walking home from the library yesterday, and I was dealing with something difficult, and I'm on the phone with my sister, and I'm like, "Ugh, a sign would be great." And I screamed, and like, because this female cardinal like flew out from my mailbox and like literally almost flew into my face. And I know for me, like, there's definitely times where my energy just feels low and I'm not feeling it, and I'm like, okay, well, what about like a signier sign? Like, what else? Is
yeah,
that real? We're gonna question
right.
it. And I feel like, yeah, if we dismiss it, or we don't spend time with it, or we don't, nurture that relationship, we don't get the result that maybe we hope for. And so,
Hmm.
yeah, putting trust in yourself, putting trust in your intuition, and, there's really no way to mess up. I think that's really the fear behind what a lot of people kind of stops them from trusting those nudges or trusting those feelings. They think, oh, I'm going to make the wrong choice.
Hmm.
You may make a choice that then feels wrong. You make a choice and then you feel uncomfortable, and then your intuition comes back in and is like, let's go the other way, And
Here's how
so,
we'll work with that. Yeah.
yeah, we don't run out of ways to be like redirected.
Yes. Endless possibility in the hands of God. Endless.
I mean, it's true.
Um, okay, yes. Okay. So feeding the relationship. I think that's really beautiful. And then what do you do? What do you do about the doubt? What do you do about the doubt?
Yeah, I would say just being with the doubt. I think it's important to not just like, we can't be like maniacal about like, I trust myself no matter what. I'm not going to listen to these doubts. I think
Hmm.
for me, I'm also, a big proponent of like therapy, journaling, self knowledge, self awareness. Where is the doubt coming from? Like,
Hmm.
what is that? If you have, an inner voice that is saying things to you that are unkind, really looking at that. And it's not anything to, have shame around. It's like we all have that at some point in our life. We've been raised in society, and, especially if we're in like a Western modern society, there's so much shame that comes in with even just having opinions or having desires or having needs, you know? And so I think just being with that doubt and, you know, reassuring that part of yourself that's like, I'm afraid. I'm afraid this is not going to go well. But also, like, at
Mhm.
the same time, holding that other part of you that's like, this is what I'm really feeling, and connecting with the body and really knowing like, okay, where is the doubt in my body? And like, where is that nudge that tells me like, but I want to do this, or I want to experience something. And
Mhm.
so if we can kind of nurture that relationship, and don't be afraid of doubt, because I have doubt, you know, I spend lots of time nurturing my intuition. I'm always, you know, tuning into things. And, you know, even if I actually go to you know, a food store in person and like would checkout line, I'm like, not because I'm in a hurry, just like I
Mhm.
want to see, like, will my intuition take me somewhere surprising? Or, you know, before a meeting, like sort of tuning in, is there anything I need to know? You know, and what can surprise me, just having that element of curiosity, and also not being afraid of the doubt, because it never goes away. I don't believe that. I don't think it
Agreed.
should.
I mean, I thought what you said there that really hit for me was like it would it would be a bit it would almost be a bit sociopathic to not
Yeah.
have doubt. You know,
Well,
like
yeah, if you look at
be
people that
concerning.
seem they do well, there's definitely people that can just sort of, you know, accrue power and have no self-doubt and just, you know, go after whatever they want, and they don't have any self-awareness or doubt. So I think doubt makes us human in a good way.
Totally. Yeah. And I mean, I agree. Never goes away. And it's like almost a work with rather than like a suppress or rip. Like I often will be like, I doubt is often my inner child. So I'll just like ask
Yeah.
her to come sit next to me and not run the reading, but she can sit there, you know, and
Yeah.
um, because yeah, I mean, doubt's just a part of it, but it's just like, do I make my choices from that place? Maybe not, you know, maybe I don't make my
Yeah.
choices from doubt.
Yeah, or like, what can we offer that doubt, like, to feel safe to make this choice?
Yeah, what can we offer? That's nice. Mm. Okay, so folks are building their intuition. Now, specifically folks who, because honestly, Cheryl, I've seen them in my own clients, and I don't work with people developing their intuition specifically, but I often attract those who are just naturally developing their
Yeah,
intuition.
absolutely.
And I've seen, you know, a few of them, it's like they more naturally connect to their loved ones that have passed, or even loved ones of people around them. Um, do you have any pointers for how to manage that? Because I think they're curious, they're afraid, you know, like,
Yeah.
yeah, what do you got for them?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, connecting to our own loved ones in spirit is so natural. Actually, what I see more often, I almost never see people that aren't connecting. More often than that, I see people that are connecting so naturally and effortlessly, and it just feels like their loved one is like in their mind, like all the time, especially like when
Mm,
they're really missing them, or when they're, you know, they're sort of sending out that vibration of like, I miss you, I wish you were around. Spirit like can hear that and feel that vibration. And so they will be very, very close. And it can show up almost like, you know, you may meet someone or get yourself into a situation, and all of a sudden you're flooded with thoughts of like, this is how my loved one would handle this. You
yeah.
know, you know, my friend here, if they were here, they would be really generous to this person, or, you know, whatever that is. And so it can be so natural, kind of like, you know, we walk through the woods, but if we take the same path every day, it's like we're wearing it down, and it's just really easy to get there. And so mediumship is very subtle. And so I would say, first of all, just noticing that, you know, that curiosity or that desire for connection will often bring connection right in. And then, you
Mm,
know, it's not like we see in Hollywood. It's, you know, it's not like Whoopi Goldberg and like Ghost, if that's not too like old of a reference. It's not like she's not like, listen, you're in danger, you know. It's
right.
really much more subtle, And it's just this sort of like sensing, like projecting thoughts, like feeling sensations, and also, seeing things, maybe hearing things. It can also be feeling, smelling, tasting things.
Yeah.
Um, as far as like being afraid, I mean, there is nothing, my belief is we have nothing to fear from the spirit world. I think everything that we need to protect ourselves from is on the earth.
Mm.
It's that living energy. It's people, who maybe, we may be giving energy to, or like we don't necessarily want to give energy to that person. I don't believe there's anything to fear in the spirit world. I always love to set an intention before any type of spiritual work, really before anything. If you want your life to change in like one simple step, just set an intention for what you do. I'm going to set an intention before I go on this walk. I'm going to set an intention before I make this phone call. It's the easiest way to start to kind of be the director of your own life. And
That's
so
good.
intention for me, intention for me is just like, we have to do that in everything. And spirit work, spirit communication to me is sacred. And especially where someone's trusting me to connect for them, I'm always setting a really clear intention. And whatever that is for that day, I'm tagging on the end of it, for the highest good of everyone involved. And it just sort of recognizes that I don't know everything. I'm not supposed to know everything. There's this mystery. And maybe some readings aren't meant to happen, or some information isn't meant to be shared. And that is the only thing I do in terms of, like protection, is just to get into a space of love so I don't bring my own stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and not harming someone with my judgment or my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
We can always tell we're in that space of connecting to spirit when you're like looking across from you, you're doing a reading, or, and you just feel like, oh, I love this person. You start to feel that love of the spirit world. And it's
Oh,
like,
yeah.
it's like that desire sometimes to even embrace them, and it's not our desire, it's spirit moving through us. And so
Mm-hmm.
even if we just do that on our own with our own loved ones, it brings us into a different space of love. It gives us access to
Mm-hmm.
something, that place where we all come from, and we can just remember it.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. So setting intention and then also just realizing how subtle this can be. And I want to highlight that point because, those who I have worked with to help build their intuition, there is an expectation that it be, like a loud voice in your ear, like, seeing something with your eyes, whatever it is. And when in fact, it is something that you likely have been doing for so long that you just wouldn't see it as a gift because it's what you do. And so, to your point, if you have a past loved one that's close to you and you often have them in your thoughts or whatever that happens to be, that right there could be communication, but you've never thought of it that way because you've always been, you know, dreaming of them, thinking of them.
Absolutely. And also just those subtle feelings. And we're all working with sort of different levels of awareness. I can definitely remember times in my life where it's very shut down. And really, I think a lot of really intuitive people have gone through periods like that. And so I think really highly intuitive people almost have to maybe even work a little harder to open it up because we've shut it down. We've consciously like trained ourselves to block people out because it's too
Mm,
much. And so if someone is listening to this thinking like, well, I'm not intuitive, I bet you really, really are. And you needed to like protect yourself from like impressions and, thinking about when you walk in a room and there's been an argument, like we can just feel that. We're walking
mm,
down the street, we're ready to turn the corner, we know someone's there or the street is empty. It's something that's just, our soul is communicating to us all the time. You meet
mhm.
someone and they feel like you're just going to have a connection, or like the opposite, like you're just like, I don't want to even shake that person's hand. Um, and I don't even need to know why. It's like, so we all
Yep.
have this. And if it's really high, especially, in childhood, we may shut it down. And so I think those people have to work sometimes even harder to open it back up.
Interesting. And hadn't thought about it that way. And as you were speaking, I was thinking about men and women, I'm going to guess that you have a larger proportion of women that come to you for training. Is that fair to say? Fair
Hmm.
guess? Hmm.
Yes, I have some men in my classes, but I would say
Yeah.
maybe it's even like 90% women.
Yeah. Why do you think that is?
Um, like besides being a lesbian, I don't know.
No, I don't think it's a
I
you
don't know.
thing.
Yeah, I think that women, I feel like men have such a hard, time like leaning into that sensitive side, really through no fault of their own. I have two adult kids. I have two boys, and they're both really intuitive and
Mhm.
mediumistic and really sensitive. And so that's been like encouraged and nurtured. So I know what that looks like. But I think men have such a hard it's hard to be a sensitive man like in our society. Like it's not really nurtured, especially children. I feel like we don't really make space for sensitive boys, for sensitive men. And intuition is a sensitivity. It's the ability to pick up on information in the world around us, right? So we have to go into that vulnerable space, and we just don't really, I think allow men that
Right,
opportunity very often, like as a society. I'm not saying
right.
like women don't allow men. It's like it's
No, no.
everyone. It's our society is not structured to support that. We expect, more things of men. Um, and I've worked in a corporate world and I've been in lots of meetings where I'm the only woman there. And so I've kind of operated in that space of like, I'm not showing any emotion, like absolutely no way, And so I've definitely been in that space. And I think it's really hard on men because it doesn't feel safe to open up.
Right. It's not only not celebrated, it is fully shamed and shut down.
Yes,
And it's interesting because
absolutely.
it's shut down in women too, but it's shut down from a place of like, how do we suppress their power? It's like shut down from a different place, if that makes sense. How tricky.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's
Curious,
true. I
what?
mean, there's lots of lovely men in my classes.
Yeah. And I specifically remember one, I can't remember his name, but I would often practice with him and
I know
he
who
was
you mean.
such a natural.
Yeah.
Um, okay. I'm curious, what did you do for work prior to this, if you don't mind sharing?
Oh yeah, I worked my career when I got into this, I was a finance manager working for Ford. And so I worked in the car business for 17 years, and had some jobs before that in like the restaurant industry. And so yeah, my last job was a complete change.
Yeah. Okay.
A complete
And
change.
like, how did that go? I'm curious because I know there are so many people in the audience that do this work as a side hustle.
Yeah.
And, they're always wondering at what point will I make a leap? So, what did that transition look like for you? Was it abrupt? Did you hold on to the day job as long as possible?
Yeah, it was abrupt. It was really abrupt. I started, I was having this, my son was having this health crisis. I was really having this like burnout and trying to take care of myself and trying to work, and also like the mediumship was opening up. And I got to a place with my work where, I was on, family leave. And then they eventually said, like, we need you to come back if you want to keep your job. And it's got to be, whatever the 50 or 60 hours, like whatever the minimum is.
Hmm.
And just, I couldn't do it. Like, I knew I couldn't do it. And I'm very lucky. I had been in a place, I had been working for a long time. I had a partner, I had my ex-husband at the time, and we both kind of wanted to get out of the business that we were in. We were working together. And so I had the means to kind of say like, okay, I'm not gonna come back. Like, I'm not gonna do this. I can't. It was that ultimatum is such a gift. And then I went and did some training at the Arthur Findlay College in the UK, and I rented an office space at first, really just because I needed the quiet. My kids were younger. I needed the space to connect. And then I just started doing free readings for, I think it was about a month or two. I did like 25 free readings. That was my goal. And then I just let people book with me and just started working. So it really was very quick.
And you knew, like, when you left Ford, you knew, like, I'm going to go full time into my mediumship.
I don't think I did know. I just really, to be honest, I was at this point in my life where I felt like I had nothing to lose. I felt like my life was ending every day I woke up. I felt like I was going to die. I don't really know how else to explain it. I just felt like something was going to happen or my life was ending. And I just was in this place, which feels horrible at the time, but it's also kind of a gift because it's like, well, I don't even care what happens to me
It is a
because I was
gift.
in that space of, just kind of that was my bottom. And I was just like, this is what spirit is telling me to do. Like, this is the only thing that feels good to me. And this is what I'm going to do. So, it's really not good business advice. you know it's really not, but it just is my journey. And I feel like everyone's different. Like, there's working for yourself isn't easy. It's not something we have to jump into. I think it's really nice if people can hang on to the job that kind of gives them some stability, and then you're able to kind of slowly transition yourself so that you can take better care of yourself. And not everyone has the capacity to like just jump in that way. And I think one thing that makes it really hard for people is like we feel like there's sort of people still say to me all the time, like, oh, you do this full time. And I have been doing this full time for 7 years now, but it's like this false like legitimacy. It's like, oh, that's like legitimate because you do it full time. It's like that doesn't mean anything to me. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like if I had the capacity to, do another job and I was happy and I just felt like I could take care of myself and do this, I probably would. It
Hmm.
doesn't make sense for me, right now with the way my business is, but there's nothing wrong with, spiritual folks. Like lots of my clients that are, in like my business class and things like that are doing, two different jobs. And I think it's kind of, unfortunately, it's like the society we live in. And, we all need to, we all need to survive and take care of ourselves.
Yeah. And, I think the path towards, if someone is going to be doing this work full time, the path towards that is certainly not always going to be the same. I
No.
think there are some like, there are like some ways that it goes, and the way that you described yours, I'm like, I feel the same in that I was like, in my day job, I had reached a limit in myself, like a limit of how much I can give. Like I was at the end of that rope and I was completely
Yeah.
burnt out. And what I love about what you said is like, actually, that ends up being a gift. And it does, because when you get there, you're like, oh, okay, I have to leave my job. Because whereas before you might be like, oh, I can't leave my job. That's security, that's money, that's whatever. But when you get
Yeah.
to the end of your rope, you're like, I don't even care about those things. I got to leave my job.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so I can relate to that aspect.
Yeah, but I think also like just to be real with people, like, I feel very lucky. Like I was able to work for a lot of years and a higher paying job and I had savings,
Yeah.
and I'm married now. Like my wife has, a more typical job. She has insurance. So like I have insurance for, through her. And it's I think a lot of it is about like how can I make my life work? Like how can I need less stuff? Like how can I make my life, just smaller? Like and that's really what it is for me. It's like how can I do this work that I love and also just maybe need less?
Hmm. Hmm. Yes. I mean, yes. We just moved.
So yeah, it's a
And
choice.
we sold, just moved and sold everything. And so it's
I know,
definitely,
I love it
we've
so
been
much.
we've been sitting with like as we set up our lives here, we're like, what's the least possible that we can be comfortable with? Because we just spent so much time selling for months. We're like, why would we reaccumulate and have these big bills and all that sort of thing? Anyway, so
It's so
um,
true. I could talk about that for hours.
yeah, it's nice. It's very liberating. It's very liberating.
Yeah.
Um, Okay, so 7 years in business, and this happened recently, right? That was like a month or so ago.
Yeah, I was in May. Yeah.
Okay, and so I'm sure you did like some reflection or it naturally came up, but I'm curious, 7 years in business, what's one thing that you want to share about it?
Yeah. Let me think. I think the biggest thing for me is I used to think that I was going to get to this point where it felt easy, and then I would know that I finally like made it, or I was good enough, or I was doing a good enough job that every day was just going to feel, like the good days. And
Mm,
I think this year, last year, a lot of reflection on like it really isn't like that. That's not how it works. It really is going to be always there's hard days, and there's days where, you're just thinking like, would I just like to do anything else?
right.
Or would I like to sell all my stuff and like move to an island? But no, I do love where I live. And but I feel like, yeah, like really letting go of that I'm gonna get to this place of making everyone happy, or like just feeling content myself every day, and that's sort of measure of success. I think, just being in the season that we're in, like surrendering to whatever
Mhm.
season we're in. Maybe you're, looking at, colleagues or people that are like going on like a book tour, or like doing something that maybe you might want to do, and it can really we get in our heads, especially when we work for ourselves. We don't Our colleagues are all in spirit. Our coworkers are all in the other realm. And
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, just being kind of going with the season you're in. And maybe this is your time to kind of be behind the scenes or reflect, or, set up for
Hmm.
different times where, creativity is like bursting from you. And so,
Hmm.
yeah, I
It's
guess
kind of,
that's my big thing that I would take from it.
it's kind of like a there's no you're there sort of
Yeah, there's no
message.
spiritual
Yeah.
finish line.
There's no you're there in your business. There's no there you're there in life. Well, there is. You are there and I am there. We're there.
We are there. Yeah, we're
It's there.
wherever we are, we're here.
Yeah, this is there. Here's
Yeah.
there. Okay, anyway. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that share. Okay, Sheryl, thank you so much for coming on today and talking
Oh, thank you for having
intuition,
me.
business, this full spectrum. Share with folks how they can work with you.
Yeah, so I have lots of stuff on my website, SherylWagnerMedium.com. They can work with me in a session, in a mediumship reading, or an intuitive reading. There's lots of classes, self-paced, or you can join a class, or you can read my book and see if you're, if it's a good vibration for you. And then I have Psychic Summer School coming up in July, which is a great, I think, entry point for people that are just curious and looking, like you said, to be around other people, that want to talk about these things and want to be like, oh, let's practice. Can we see each other's auras? And practice with folks, and do this work, and yeah, be in the space with me, and just experience, working with intuition for the summer. So that's always a fun time.
Yeah, when I saw it, I was like, brilliant, psychic summer school. You think about summer school as a kid, and you're like, summer school is super fun. You couldn't wait to go. And often, as spiritual entrepreneurs, we're like, oh, I can't run a course over summer because there's this, thought that people don't want to commit to a course. But when I saw that, I was like, oh my gosh, what a fun way for someone who's like, I want to play around with my intuition. What a fun way
Yeah.
to dip in through summer school. That's great. And I
Yeah, it
assume there will
is.
be
It's a very good time.
practice built in.
Yes, yes. So we do it's the online course. So it's the Uncovering Intuition online course, and then there's this live version that I'm running in the summer. So last year was the first year. I'm doing it again this year. It was honestly so much fun, and I feel like more than that, there's a lot of people that had like breakthroughs, which how gratifying that is to see in this work where, you know, you just get to be there when someone's like, wait a minute, like I have this power, or like I'm realizing this, and that's such an amazing space to hold. So, yeah, so I'm doing it again, and it's a really nice group that's come together. We meet on Thursdays from July through August, and it's a nice time.
So fun. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for coming on. And I will continue to stay connected with you. And just, I'm grateful for you and the impact you've had on my life and journey.
Oh, thank you, Angel. It's an honor to be here and chat with you. Thank you.
Yay. Okay, Spirit Club. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next week. Bye.